My favorite thing was playing the new person card, just because you can ask the dumbest questions, and the dumbest questions yield to the most insightful results.
Hello and welcome to the Vigilante Leverage Show. I'm Matthew Bergenson.
And I'm Lukas Ung.
And Lukas, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about a huge thing that if you work at any technology company that I've ever worked at, you're going to hear this a lot. But the gap and the siloing between different departments, specifically marketing and sales. I guess I'll start off here. Hypothetically, you have marketing that leads to sales, right? Because there's some kind of awareness buildup and some kind of campaign that then results in sales conversations, right? But if you go talk to any marketing department and then the corresponding sales department at that same company, and then ask each other what each other do and what you think that you're supposed to be doing, and then ask the other person those same questions, you're going to get completely different answers. One sales team might just be like, marketing's supposed to get us leads, but they're not doing anything. All their leads are crap. And then marketing, you go talk to them and they're just like, we've been delivering so many leads to sales and they're just not closing anything. And we're doing what we promised. We're above our KPIs. And so you just hear this time and time again. And that's a fun conversation for today.
Oh boy. Yeah, this one's a whole can of worms. Let's see if we survive this one intact.
Oh man, there have been some pretty heated moments. Do you have any anecdotes to start with, or shall I kind of go for it first?
Yeah, I'm trying to think about which ones I can disclose into what level.
Valid.
Because that gets a little spicy. The biggest one is, I think a lot of the problem stems from, the departments never speak to each other properly in most companies, but also definition of terms is not clearly laid out. So what counts as an MQL, like a marketing qualified lead, versus what counts as a sales qualified lead, versus what is just a lead. Oftentimes there's not an agreement in definitions across departments. And so I think that's one of the major drivers of confusion and frustration, is that, different people will be talking about different things and they're like, but I got you 100 leads. And then meanwhile, they're like, you got me 0 leads. And they don't agree because their definitions are just different. So that's something that I see very clear, very commonly is a lack of definitions, a lack of agreement on terms, aside from the siloing issue, which is just departments not talking to each other, not communicating, not, marketing will, often be aware that our cost per lead went up a whole lot. It's going to, we're not going to be delivering as many on a silver platter this week. And then they usually won't mention that. And then sales is shocked that, lo and behold, they didn't get the lead flow that they were expecting. So yeah, there's basic communication issues, but I would say that the terms and definitions is at the root of a lot of problems.
When I was in the corporate world, I didn't work on the marketing side of things. I worked on the sales side of things. And I cannot think of a single role as an individual contributor in the sales side or as a sales leader where I would rely on marketing to hit my quota at all. Couldn't even draw 10% of attributable quota drawdown from marketing. 100% of everything that I got was through essentially my own hunting, my own prospecting, or my team's hunting and prospecting based on the role that I was actually sitting in. And I think that more than just the definition, I think that the incentive structure for compensation for people really drives the behavior. I mean, I think that it's obvious to say that compensation drives behavior, but when you have two very different goals, which is create demand versus close deals, you necessarily actually are going to be, on the lines with a lot of how those roles are going to interact. So even on top of the definitions, marketing is going to do everything they can to get as many people as minimally qualified as possible to hit their goals so they can get paid. And sales wants the maximum. So marketing's I want the bare minimum here to qualify for an MQL or an SAL or an SQL or whatever, because this is how we get paid. Sales is the range of people for an MQL or SAL or whatever you're measuring can it has bounds. Here's the lower bound, here's the upper bound. And sales wants it over here because the more qualified it is, the easier it is to actually close. And marketing is just no. We get paid over here. So even more than just the definition, there's this little gray space where, there's always going to be a disconnect. And I have seen good sales and marketing orgs that communicate these well and are compensated together. And the only way they do that is by actually linking their goals together. together, which is, of course, revenue into the company. If marketing is compensated based on deals that are actually closed, all of a sudden, wow, the quality of the leads goes so far up.
It goes really high. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not to say that marketing's bad, but it's just funny how that works.
And Lukas and I both have a more sales biased perspective. Well, I mean, Lukas has exclusively worked on the sales side of things. If we're talking about that dichotomy, I've got a little bit more of a blend, but I'm also sales heavy. So we are approaching it from that frame and perspective.
Yeah. That said, I was at a Fortune 10 technology company where we were doing some very close alignment with account-based marketing campaigns mixed with our sales plays. And that was a little bit better. And we had communication across the channels. But the funny thing is we only had communication across the channels because, my side of people and their side of people actively reached out to get this working together harmoniously. And even then, some of the metrics weren't aligned. But even if the metrics weren't aligned, we could be aligned as individual people. And we could agree that the outcome we'd like to see is this. And so even if the metrics weren't aligned, we could do that. But at the end of the day, we could have just existed in silos, never talked to each other. They hit their goals, we hit our goals completely independently and never added value. So it is very interesting because I did see some of my colleagues did have that issue and they never wanted to reach across the aisle to have that conversation and really marry it. But if you don't, then you're just going to get crap results, crap in, crap out.
Yeah. I think one of the things that made me maybe not the best employee, but that's really, really helped me later in life is that I desperately wanted to always know what marketing was up to, like really nitty gritty. Like I'd spend bonus time, like unpaid, just to find out what marketing was doing, how the campaigns were working, why they were targeting the people that they were, what sort of language they were using. Because I wanted to understand how people's awareness of the brand was developing so that when I got on the phone with them, it was a coherent message and it all worked.
I think you're a unique blend there.
Yeah, sales managers did not like how much time I would spend with the marketing people.
Yeah, like, I'm sure your compensation statement was also
it's really good, like.
And they're just like, why don't you talk to more people?
Yeah, right. Well, the only reason my close rate's so good is because I understood, why they clicked on the thing that they did.
Actually, that just brought up another memory. A different Fortune, I guess this is also a Fortune 10 company that I worked at. They would bring in MQLs and they would route them through. And essentially, when you got brought on as a salesperson, you're like, oh, MQLs are going to get routed through here. And then they have all of this information on the campaigns you should use to go reach out to them based on the MQL that came in. You can see the asset they downloaded. And then about 90% of the time, when you reached out to the person, they're just like, I didn't download an ebook. Or they'd be like, I wasn't in that webinar. But the funny thing is because that material was like content syndication via third parties. So it didn't explicitly have the name of our company on it, but it was, it was together with in combined effort with other companies. And so I think we went like 6 to 8 months with nobody everybody thinking all the MQLs were crap before we realized, oh, this is the context and this is how you should use the content. Got it. So 6 to 8 weeks or 6 to 8 months of wasted MQLs.
That's brutal. Yikes.
Yeah. That's, at the scale of that company, that was probably like tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars wasted, not to mention human capital costs.
Definitely hundreds of thousands.
Yeah. And all those marketing managers, they're getting paid they're getting paid 150 minimum, maybe 250, 300. And all of that time is getting wasted too. Not to mention the salespeople's time getting paid at least that as well. Crazy.
Why do you think they end up siloed so frequently? Because to me, it's such just so blatantly obvious that you shouldn't silo things for a number of reasons. One is you'll have more engaged employees when they find out exactly how they fit into the bigger picture. That's a huge one. One is that, your ad spend is going to be so much better directed when you have a proper feedback loop from the very top of funnel to the very bottom of funnel. Everyone's just happier when they can agree on terms and definitions and working towards a common goal. I think that revenue is the only real target that matters at the end of the day. Revenue for sales and marketing that's it. Like, have other metrics for other lines of business, but it's the only thing that really matters there. So why do you think that people silo so much because to me, it seems really just stupid that people would do that. Why do you think it's so common?
I think it's common when a company starts to disconnect themselves from the end outcome. And what I mean by that is there's a certain point where you can hire a certain number of people under you. And what you do is you look at the life cycle of like your customer. You're like, we engage with them at this point, and then we've tracked, 7 stages until they get to close. So there's like the first stage here, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. And at the very beginning, you have a CEO, the owner or founder, co-founder, whatever, that's handling all of that, right? And then maybe eventually you hire a salesperson or like a joint sales and marketing person, and you just kind of figure it out. And then they just take over that whole process. But then at a certain point, I think that companies scale and they're like, there's 7 steps here. So these steps we can really focus marketing type stuff on. So like, this is like content. Let's get them aware of us. And like, they make up these imaginary steps that people have to go through in their heads, right? Like you have no idea what people are actually thinking about. You're like, but we think that they're thinking that. So they create these imaginary steps. They start walking them through and they say, let's have marketing handle these first 3. And then let's have sales handle these second 4. And then because marketing can't do anything to impact those last 4 steps, and sales can't do anything to impact the first 3 steps, let's have marketing compensated only on how well they do steps 1, 2, 3. And then let's have sales compensated only on how well they do steps 4, 5, 6, 7. And I think that that's where that happens, because it comes from a good place. Like you're like, let's just let people focus and get paid the way they need to get paid. But then that, like you said, it creates silos. It creates the misalignment of definitions, the misalignment of how they do things. And all of a sudden you have these 2 organizations that are butting heads when really you're on the same team.
When the incentives should really align. And as unfortunate as it sounds, I feel like everyone should be judged on step 7. If it's an end-to-end customer journey, like, did the customer make the journey or not? Or did we hit an iceberg in the middle of the Atlantic and the customer did not make it?
You know what my favorite thing is there was one company that we worked on together where essentially everybody in the company was rallied around in that metaphoric or in that hypothetical example, step 7, revenue to the company. Every single person was basically aiming towards that. And I have never seen, even though like it was kind of haphazard, there wasn't SLAs and SOPs defined, like we're kind of figuring it out as we went. The entire company rallied around that. If sales was struggling, operations would step in and say, how can we help? Where are we dropping the ball? How can we make this smoother? If operations wasn't working, salespeople would say, all right, I'm going to take 1 day off of my sales things and let's try not to diminish the pipeline too much. And let me roll up my sleeves and let me help deliver. And then marketing, if they're like, we're not delivering things, marketing's just like, okay, let me sit with the salespeople every single day and listen on the calls and see what type of customers you're closing. So then we can try to target those customers from a marketing standpoint. And it was so beautifully aligned because everyone was focused on that last step, revenue in.
Yeah, that worked really well. And it was, like you said, it was haphazard for sure. It worked. Like, I'd rather have
ridiculous goals.
Like, would you rather have a haphazard thing that gets you money or a really well-oiled machine that just sits idle because nobody can agree on how to light the thing up?
I think that a lot of people would still say the latter, which is the crazy thing. But the best part about the haphazard thing is like, you can, like, once you have it haphazardly working, you can start to operationalize and systematize it. But if you've operationalized and systematized a dysfunctional machine, then you're only going to get dysfunction, which is why I'm with you.
Yeah, you have embedded dysfunction at that point.
Yeah.
You have systematized dysfunctionality.
Yeah. Not a good thing, everybody. Not a good thing to do. Wouldn't recommend.
Wait, well, how exactly is it that you achieve so much dysfunction in your company? Well, let me tell you, we have SOPs for our dysfunction. We have a Class A dysfunction, we have Class B dysfunction, and Class C dysfunction, and we take those SOPs and SLAs very seriously. Because can you imagine if we did not dysfunction properly? My goodness, what a day that would be!
It would be way too profitable for us, terribly profitable, and we can't have that. No, terrible.
Yeah. If you hate having a profitable company, there's lots of other consultants for you, but you like making money.
Yeah, I mean,
that was a line.
In my opinion, unsolicited opinion on this, I think the first thing people need to do is find something that freaking works. Make it work first. Once you have it work, then you can start to build a system around what works and improve the things that aren't working. But until it works, like, stop trying to create SOPs and SLAs around crap that's not working. Stop trying to like silo people. And if you're just like, oh, we need to silo information so that we don't start up our own competitors internally or so people don't leave and do it themselves. I'm like, I think you've missed the whole point of why you hire trusted employees to do the job in the first place.
Yeah. Codifying dysfunction is pretty spectacular thing. I see it a lot in HR departments that don't have enough to do, or that haven't been given like a clear mission and mandate. And they're like, well, I guess we better just document all the things that are going wrong, rather than like, but how can we fix it? Yeah. I think that, I mean, as someone who spent a lot of time in the construction and development industry in particular, HR always gets sort of relegated or denigrated as something less useful. But I think that knowing what your people are up to and making sure that they're all happy, healthy, and optimally productive is at some point the highest leverage thing that you can be working on.
So I actually have an interesting question about that. I've been going back and forth about this because sometimes I'm just like, maybe I should be working on the HR side of things, because at some point you're like, oh man, some of these things need to be, more specifically, tangibly built out. But do you think that once you start to stumble into a haphazardness that works and you're starting to systematize things, is that the job of the operators, like the salespeople, the marketing people, the actual logistics delivery people, however that looks? Or is that the job of some kind of strategist, some kind of sales ops person, some kind of HR person? What do you think?
I think it's best done by the person actually in the role, but not everybody's good at it. And then I think that the best thing to do at that point is threaten them with, if you don't document this properly, you're going to be followed around by an anal retentive engineer and he will document what you do. So I think that's the way to get that done.
I do like the idea of somebody that is just like the lone wolf top performer, whether it's a salesperson or marketing or operations. That's just like, I don't know, you just got to go with the feel, and you have somebody that's very logically follow them around and document the processes. I think that there's something to that, actually. It's kind of funny.
I've seen that work very effectively. I've seen that work in the automotive industry, where a lot of the people who are really doing a good job of just banging out product are not necessarily the people that you'd want writing anything coherent.
Fair.
And so, so those people, you send somebody very process and detail oriented to follow them around. And it's really not that expensive to hire somebody who's just like, and it sometimes helps if it's a person who doesn't have a great understanding of what's going on, because who else isn't going to have a perfect understanding of what's going on? Anybody that you bring in to replace that role.
Man.
So you kind of hire somebody a little bit clueless, but very detail oriented and very inquisitive, and they'll just drive the person up the wall for 3 days. Productivity will tank, but at the end of it, you'll have something very, very clearly documented on how value is created for the company at that step, which value creation documentation, I feel like, is a different thing from SOPs. SOPs tend to just gather dust on a shelf. But if it's like, these are the things that make the company money. This is how we create value. This is why people enjoy doing business with us. Here it is. These are the steps to make sure that the product is really great, or the customer experience is amazing, or that sales and deals get across the line. Documenting how value is truly created in a company is a necessary step. And I think somebody not knowing exactly what they need to do, but asking a lot of questions and writing everything down very meticulously is the way to do it. And again, those people just aren't really that expensive compared to the value, like the long-term value that you get out of it.
So like the outside perspective is super important, it sounds like. Yeah,
because you don't need an insider perspective until that insider is gone and you're trying to replace them, and now everyone's going to be an outsider.
What my favorite thing is, I've worked at a number of different jobs. When I've worked different jobs and come into a new customer or a new job, my favorite thing was playing the new person card, just because you can ask the dumbest questions, and the dumbest questions yield to the most insightful results. And it's funny because you can really tell who's been in the industry, because with some people you ask dumb questions and they roll their eyes because they're just like, this should be obvious. And that those are the wrong people in the room. But then you ask dumb questions to the people who actually, who know what they're doing. And they're like, you're right. Back to basics. We actually do need this. We've kind of lost sight of what we've been doing. And they're the best questions you can ask. Like even defining terms. I remember we were sitting in a room and everyone was saying EDI, EDI, right? And from an IT standpoint, you're like, I know what that stands for. But then on an internal Slack that we had running, just between us, like we're basically like looking down our laptops. We're just like, are they saying EDI? Is it VDI? Wait, what are they saying here? And then I'm just like, oh shoot, yeah, right. Like, what are they saying here? And we're just like, all right, who wants to be the one to ask the dumb question? What are you guys saying, and what does it stand for? Because we were 45 minutes into this conversation about this topic, and like no one wanted to do it, so we just stopped. I was like, all right, guys, dumb question. I need to ask this. What are those 3 letters you've been saying? What do they stand for? And then they're just like, oh, and then they just explained it. And then like half the people that weren't even in the conversation on the Slack thread were just like, thank you for clarifying. We need to change a couple of things in our notes now. And so, you know, the dumb questions, they matter.
And Lucas, for those that don't know, what does EDI stand for?
It was, so we thought it stood for like electronic data interchange, right?
Right.
But it actually was an internal term that the customer was using for something completely different.
Interesting. All right. So like half the people were totally on the wrong page.
Yeah, my guess is more than half the people were on the wrong page. They had like an internal system that's what they had labeled it. It kind of threw everybody off.
They're so dangerous when everybody thinks other people know what the acronym means.
Yeah, I would not recommend
like the 3-letter ones. Like it's just seems really easy to get multiple 3-letter acronyms to line up. Like once you get into like stupidly long acronyms, they're almost their own unique term. But it's really easy to have 3 letters.
Yeah, and every company thinks that their 3 letters are the only 3 letters. You know, when I worked for one of the big tech companies, it was acronyms upon acronyms upon acronyms, and they had a rule where when you have written documentation, you have to make sure that the very first time you use the acronym in the documentation, you have to define it, even if you think it's obvious. And then afterwards, in the rest of the document, you can use the acronym. And I like that rule.
Yeah. No, I think that is a paramount rule. I've always used that. Because it just seemed goofy to not do it. I was taught when I was a 4th grader that that's how you do it. But really, I think it was like a 4th or 5th grade writing class where I was taught that you do that, and I've always done that. And I think it's really simplified things. Although it does get a little bit murky when you get into things like, what's the one that's always tripping people up? Is it CPL? Cost. To me, that means.
Are you talking about a marketing term, or are you talking about?
Yeah.
Here's a great example.
CPC
right?
can be cost per click or cost per customer.
I was about to say, like, I have no idea what CPO stands for, and we're both talking about marketing terms. I was going to be like, well, I know what CPM stands for, and CPA, and CPC, but so this is a great example.
Especially is CP additional letter is something that I see the most confusion about, probably.
Yeah.
Because it's important to know what all your cost per XYZ is, but I've definitely witnessed like a proper, like tensions were high on one of these cost per something terms. I wish I remembered what it was exactly, but basically one department had done an amazing job of rationing down cost per something. And then the other department was like obsessed with the cost per something else being like really, really high. And one company and one department is like just convinced that they're doing an amazing job of it. And the other one is like, no, you're doing awful at it. And it was because they were defining things differently. And
it's a classic problem.
Yeah, it was choice. Oh man. The best part was that I wasn't directly involved in that one. I just got to kind of
You just got to watch.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the best and the worst because you get to watch the train crash in slow motion.
Yeah. Yeah. That time I didn't have enough insight to like be like, oh, you guys are talking about different things. But there have been times for sure when I'm like, it's a dumb question. Like I remember I was working with a complicated, but it was for international development. And I just brought up the question of what was being discussed was like metrics for like improvement and socioeconomic development and farmers having more access to, to markets, to infrastructure, to equipment, to better quality seed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, one of the metrics was like, how many tractors are there per, 1,000 farmers or whatever? And I'm like, but why do they all need tractors? And they're like, oh, they don't need a tractor. They just need access to a tractor. I'm like, yes. How many days a year they can use this tractor? I'm sitting on it. So we're talking about Africa too. So the growing seasons are different than they are in North America.
The outside perspective matters, and that is why management consultants get paid $400,000 to $1 million.
I was just like invited to observe, and I was like, yeah.
How much did you get paid for that? That one comment alone could have saved them millions.
God, I was working day rates back then. So
yeah, those are little things that we've learned over time.
Yeah, we don't do that anymore.
I mean, so my comment from earlier was, there's a reason that management consultants get paid $400,000 to $1 million for like a month or 2 month engagement. It's not to go there and deliver something that is out of this world no one has ever seen before. It's to ask the dumb questions, redefine things, align people across different silos. And as it says, management consulting, get people on the same page and make sure they're moving towards this one goal. Rarely is it ever like a transformative thing where you're just like, wow, I never thought about electric cars before. No. They've thought about electric cars before. They're just really rallying around the right goalposts. And so I think there's a lot of value in breaking down these silos and aligning people to the same thing, whether it's marketing and sales, sales and delivery, technology and sales. Oh, that's a whole other topic. We'll bring a guest to talk about that one in later. But yeah.
Well, I mean, in management consulting, one of the things that I found most incredibly valuable is that when people pay you a whole bunch of money to fix things in your company, you then get to kind of define how you're going to go about fixing issues in their company. And one of my favorite things to do is talk to the people at the very, very, very bottom rungs of the career ladder, or the value creation method, or whatever it is that you're talking about. Like, who's on the floor? Because those people never get to talk to the C-suite usually.
Yeah.
And things break somewhere in those 17 layers. Something is off. And
always.
And just coming in and just direct linking problems on a very granular level and getting them up to top level management without getting filtered or jargoned out by middle management into something, it's like a game of broken telephone. Anyway, just being the direct line between, the people on the ground and top level management is a really, really easy way to add value in a lot of cases. And also, if you're running your own company, you can skip paying a management consultant $400,000 or $500,000 and just go talk to your employees.
Yeah. Self-consulting. I think that's why a lot of like companies love to hire executives that have like 5 years of like MBB management consulting experience, because they're just like, these people know how to run the consulting thing. They will go do it at the company. It's all they know how to do. So they're excellent leaders at these like mid-market companies or potentially enterprise companies as well. And at a smaller company, you're probably going to see less like management consulting people with quote unquote pedigree. And I hate that word, by the way, but it's what people use, jumping in to take those positions. So as a business owner, you can take charge and just do that yourself and, break down those silos.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's the call to action today, isn't it? Down with the silos.
Break down the silos.
Unless you're in grain storage, then, you can keep your silos.
Oh, yeah. Actually reinforce them.
Yes, please do. All right. Well, I think that's about all we've got on this topic. We're going to start beating a dead horse pretty soon. But yeah.
Yep.
Don't have silos. Try to define terms across your organization so that everyone's talking about the same things. It's the very basic building blocks of communication. Make sure that people are trying to hit targets that are aligned. Make sure that the incentives are not at odds with each other. And actually talk to people. At the end of the day, it's
always comes down to it.
Yeah.
Always.
Although one day we're going to have an episode about when to ignore people, because sometimes the things that people tell you are pure BS.
That'll be for next time.
That'll be a fun one, though. All right. Until then, we'll see you around. This has been the Vigilante Leverage Show. I'm Matthew Bergenson.
And I'm Lukas Ung.
All right. Well, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you soon. Bye.